Hey guys! Welcome to Turkish Spotlight Secrets. All the details are in our video. Don't forget to subscribe to Turkish Spotlight Secrets and share this video before we dive in. Thank you so much. Today, whispers from behind the curtain sent ripples through the entertainment world. The claim that Akınözü quietly met with Ebru Şahin last night, and that the meeting was prompted by a promise tied to Akın's late mother, has turned social media into a storm. The actor, widely known for being deeply attached to his family, has reportedly been haunted by his mother's gentle counsel, told to him years ago and repeated during her illness, a message that lingers like a bell: listen to your heart and live in a way that won't fill you with regret. That sentiment, sources claim, is what pushed Akın to cross a bridge he had left untouched for a long time and seek out a conversation with Ebru. According to the talk of the night, Akın and Ebru chose a small cafe tucked into a quiet corner of Istanbul for the encounter, a place where the light is low and the staff know when to stay invisible. The two were ushered into a back room that had been prepared to keep prying eyes far away. We're told they entered through different doors minutes apart to avoid attention, and once inside, they let the room swallow everything but the words they needed to say. 2 hours, give or take, is how long the meeting lasted, and those who were nearby insist the energy shifted throughout, from measured, cautious tones to laughter that broke tension the way a breeze lifts a curtain. Witness accounts paint Ebru as initially reserved, choosing silence instead of rushing into warmth. But as Akın shared pieces of his mother's story, the small rituals of her strength, the phrases she used to anchor him, Ebru's guard reportedly softened. His voice, cleared by the weight of grief, didn't ask for sympathy, it asked for honesty. He opened doors they had kept shut for too long. Past misunderstandings that had stood like gatekeepers between them were finally addressed. They didn't try to erase history, they examined it, accepted it, and at times even smiled at the parts that once stung. By the end, it is said they left the room not as strangers who happened to share the same industry, but as two people willing to keep a fragile peace alive. The fallout was immediate and intense. Online, comments surged. Some fans whispered that perhaps destiny is patient, that it just needed the right night to nudge them back into each other's orbit. Others argued that the meeting could have been nothing more than a professional check-in, a necessary thaw instead of a rekindling. Neither Akın nor Ebru offered a word of confirmation or denial, and that silence, unsurprisingly, grew louder than any statement could have. The curiosity only magnified. By morning, the entertainment world woke up restless. No one could ignore the swirl around two of the most talked about names of recent years. If there truly had been a rift, it made the meeting even more electric. But what sent the story into overdrive was the reason circulating in hushed tones. Akın's decision to see Ebru was linked to the wish of a mother who knew her son's heart better than anyone. During the hardest days of her illness, insiders say, she urged him never to leave his feelings shelved and dusty, to face what was true and stop delaying the small moments that could add up to happiness. After her passing, those words didn't fade, they grew, turning into a map that pointed him to places he had avoided. So he started with the conversation he had been postponing. That night in the cafe, shielded by soft lamps and an unspoken agreement from the staff to keep everything quiet, the two of them sat across from each other and tested the ground. They spoke about the disagreements that once tired them out, the distance that grew while both tried to protect themselves, the ache of being misread in a world that watches everything and understands little. When Akın mentioned his mother again, how she told him love, in any form, demands courage. Ebru's eyes reportedly shone. It wasn't spectacle. It was relief. Somewhere in the middle of these admissions, laughter slipped in, easy and clean, as if remembering that before the noise, they had known how to laugh together. When they finally stood to leave, the mood had softened. They didn't perform for the shadows. There was a calm exchange, an unspoken pact to keep the conversation going in a way that didn't feed the spectacle. They left separately, the way they arrived, with the space between them feeling less like a chasm and more like a hallway that might be crossed again. And then came the question everyone was afraid to say too loudly: is this a path toward reconciliation? Social media fractured into camps. One side argued that a son honoring his mother's memory with bravery in his personal life is exactly the kind of gesture that can change everything. The other side held firm that this could be a gentle, meaningful closure, or even a professional recalibration, not a reunion. Managers and close friends remained silent. Their quiet only made the speculation burn brighter. As the day wore on, tabloids filled with variations of the same revelation. Late last night, a surprise meeting that no one saw coming broke whatever stalemate existed between Akınözü and Ebru Şahin. The part that no one could stop talking about was the emotional engine behind it. Family has always been at the core of Akın's public persona. It is no shock to those who follow his work and life that he would be the kind of man to hold on to a final request and try to fulfill it with dignity. He has been described by friends as someone who doesn't like leaving tangled threads, someone who believes that, sooner or later, a knot must be worked loose. The cafe staff, said to have been briefed in advance, kept the back room sealed off. Phones were reportedly tucked away and the team was asked to keep the check low-key. The room itself, close, cozy, and dim, shaped the evening. They didn't rush. They let the small things breathe, pauses, sips of tea gone cold, the quiet acknowledgement that time had passed and yet something still mattered enough to be handled carefully. More than once, laughter broke over the table, echoing down the narrow hallway. More than once, gravity pulled them into old topics that needed a new ending. The hours passed before they noticed. Ebru's posture at the beginning, described as poised and cool, softened into a fluent openness. Akın's sincerity was not theatrical, it was steady. When he shared memories of his mother, tiny moments that outsiders could never know, he wasn't performing grief. He was simply carrying it with dignity and inviting her to understand why he had to be there. People close to Ebru say that she respects clarity, that she responds to someone who shows their hand without trembling. By the close of their talk, the distance had changed shape. They didn't promise the future, they allowed the present to be honest. That honesty led to an avalanche of theorizing online. Some longtime followers insisted this was the beginning of a new chapter, not just a single page torn from the past. Others felt that love doesn't have to return to be respected, that sometimes the bravest move is to meet without seeking to relive something, to shake hands with history and let it rest. The absence of declarations from either side continued to stoke interest. No statements. No official lines for the press. Just a hush that said more than any denial could. Night fell again, and still the story churned. Commentators argued about what came first, the need to fulfill a promise or the desire to fix a delicate bond. What most agreed upon was simple: this was not a casual run-in, not an accidental bump on a crowded street. It was planned, considered, and executed with discretion that felt intentional. It's rare in their world for anything to be done quietly. That, too, made the meeting meaningful. The next wave of coverage repeated what viewers already knew but couldn't get enough of: a clandestine meeting in a tucked-away cafe, staged so even the city's busiest rumor mill wouldn't notice until it was over, separate entrances, a private back room, roughly 2 hours of conversation that sauntered between pain, humor, and memory, a softened goodbye that hinted at open doors. The lines about his mother grew more indelible each time they surfaced. She had told him not to hoard unfinished feelings, not to pretend that silence could heal what only words could mend. She had told him not to push away joy as though it could be kept safe for later. It was those words, people said, that sent him walking into that room. The courage to admit that fear had been part of the distance. The humility to acknowledge mistakes. The willingness to hear what he didn't want to hear. And on the other side of the table, a woman strong enough to listen and to speak in equal measure, to ask for accountability without cruelty, to allow tenderness without expectation. In the hours after the story exploded, friends of both stars kept to themselves. Style pages began drafting what-if scenarios. Industry insiders wondered aloud whether the meeting hinted at future collaboration, a professional seed planted in soil that once held something more personal. Yet the strongest refrain from the fanbase was emotional: that honoring a parent's wish is a love story all on its own, even if it leads nowhere familiar. As for what comes next, that remains the great unknown. Will they meet again away from lights and lenses? Will they choose to work together, letting art carry what the heart cannot? Or will this remain a singular evening framed by a mother's words and carried out by a son who refused to let time steal his chance to say what needed saying? For now, the only truth is what those walls witnessed, two people sitting together and letting honesty do the heavy lifting. By late evening today, the buzz hadn't slowed. The notion that Akınözü arranged the meeting at least in part to honor the memory of his mother has inspired a surge of empathy, even from those who prefer to keep their expectations tempered. Fans praised the gentleness with which he approached something so fragile. Others applauded Ebru Şahin for showing up with grace, for listening carefully, for laughing when laughter felt right, and for refusing to turn the moment into public theater. Together, they reminded the audience that stardom doesn't shield anyone from ordinary human dilemmas, apologizing, forgiving, trying again, or deciding not to, but doing it with dignity. Somewhere behind all the noise, the cafe returned to normal. Cups were washed. Lights dimmed. The staff kept their silence. On social media, the question remained pinned to the top of countless feeds: is this the start of something, or the careful end of something else? Without an official line from either camp, imagination is doing the rest. Perhaps that is why the story won't fade. It carries the weight of a promise, the echo of the past, and the possibility, no matter how small, that two people can step back into the same room as new versions of themselves and not flinch. One thing is certain. Whether this moment blooms into a fresh chapter or settles into a gentle closure, it will be talked about for days, maybe weeks. It is the kind of story that keeps tabloids busy and fans tender. Not because of spectacle, but because it sounds like life. A son, a memory, a phone call, a quiet place, a conversation that took 2 hours and will take much longer to feel finished. This brings us to the end of our video. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe to Turkish Spotlight Secrets and share the video with friends who follow every twist in this tale. Until next time, stay tuned to Turkish Spotlight Secrets for the latest you won't hear anywhere else.